As many have observed for years now, and as we have tragically seen in several concrete examples, the aviation security landscape is constantly changing. Threats change, new threats emerge, and the way we deal with those threats has got to keep up. Since 9/11, we are actually aware of many countermeasures that have been put into place to address the dynamic threat picture. Every element of aviation, from the airplane itself, to procedure development, to ground infrastructure, and others, comes into play in the complex process of identifying threats, evaluating them, and developing ways to counter them when appropriate. Like everything in our business, teamwork and collaboration lead to success. And we have assembled a winning team to discuss threats and countermeasures this morning. Moderating this panel is my esteemed colleague, Captain Fred Eissler of Federal Express. He is ALPA's Aviation Security Chair. Captain Eissler, the podium is yours.
Chuck, thank you so very much. Good morning to our Washington audience and also to those of you at home that are watching the streaming video. I'd like to welcome you to our presentation. As Chuck said, I'm Captain Fred Eissler, the ALPA's Aviation Security Chairman, your host and moderator of today's panel on global aviation security initiatives. Today's aviation profession has many challenges, and I think that the most dynamic, exciting, and important challenge is in aviation security. We're dealing with an ever-changing, very adaptable, and extremely committed enemy whose sole goal in life is to disrupt, stop, or crush our industry, to do harm to our country and to our way of life. Our aviation security mission is to thwart those evildoers. As they are becoming more and more sophisticated, it is imperative that we adapt our mindset and become preventative, not just reactive in our actions. The most effective way to accomplish this is through working together, building relationships, collaboration, and learning from our colleagues throughout the world that possess areas of expertise where we can learn from each other and move the ball down the field in protecting our way of life. So with that, I would like to introduce our esteemed panel of colleagues and experts today. On my left, have Navy Captain Eric Rasmussen. He has 4,000 F-18 hours, a 28-year career, still active in the Navy, 6 deployments on carriers. He is a Sea Commanding Officer of VFA 131, Top Gun instructor, very distinguished career. Eric right now is the Continental Regional Air Operations Central Duty Commander for NORAD Northern U.S. Command at Tyndall Air Force Base. To Eric's left is Captain Martin Drake, good friend from ALPA. Martin is a 28-year veteran from British Airways, flying the 747-400. Before Martin's stint in aviation, he was a Bobby. As you can imagine, Martin wearing the appropriate attire on the streets of Britain. But with his law enforcement background, he's taken that passion, taken it into the aviation career, into his aviation career, provided to security. There's probably nobody at ALPA that has more knowledge on security in Europe than Martin. He is also the chairman of the European Cockpit Association Security Committee. Very good friend, and I know that you will certainly enjoy his comments, his charm, and his British humor. To Eric's left is Miss Sue Presti. She is the Senior Director, Government Affairs for the International Air Cargo Association. Sue is a member of the TSA's ASAC, and also she chairs the Air Cargo Subcommittee. What I need for you guys to do, as we talked about adapting our mindset, I need you to imagine Mr. Jim Krauss sitting to the left of Sue. Jim is the program manager for the FFDO program, which is the final and last defense for our profession and for our airplanes in the air. Jim, with his boss, Mr. Jesse Lay, is right now coming from TSA headquarters, as you can imagine, with the new new administrator. There's a lot of shakeups, a lot of challenges going on, and right now they were not able to get out of a fairly important meeting, but they're en route. Jim will come and slide in the back when he arrives and be able to speak on the FFDO program and how the importance of that overlaps with all the different folks that we have up here. So with that, I would like to start our panel and get going. Captain Rasmussen.
Well, thank you, Fred. for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I am, as Fred mentioned, with Norad Northcom, which is headquartered out of Colorado Springs, and they are responsible for the air defense of North America. Norad Northcom is headed by a U.S. Navy 4-star, and he's got a Canadian deputy. It's a bi-national command that we work very closely with our Canadian brethren to the north to secure the airspace over North America. Now, Norad Northcom has a number of missions, most of which I won't discuss today, but some of them just to mention them briefly. We do DISCA, Defense Support to Civil Authorities, and that involves the hurricane hunters that you hear about on the Weather Channel, aerial firefighting out west. Most of that's commercially done, but we've got a piece of it with the military. Inland search and rescue. We also operationally control the Civil Air Patrol aircraft that are stationed throughout the United States. But there are two missions that directly kind of touch the people that are in this room, and they are non-DoD requests for military assistance. So I'll talk more about that here in just a bit. And then there's air defense. Okay, that's really what NORAD Northcom were established for, is air defense. And first I'll talk about the request for military assistance. This is typically the FAA that we work very closely with, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. They ask us, hey, DoD, can you help us out with whatever problem is at hand? The Payne-Stewart scenario, hypoxia, kind of comes to mind. And that's, in my 2 years at Norad Northcom, that's happened twice, where we send up military fighters. It's typically general aviation that we go up there and we do whatever we can. In the two cases I was involved with, there wasn't much we could do, and they did not end well. We've also, on occasion, been asked to intercept commercial aircraft for threats to them, and we might talk about that a bit more later, and that's where it kind of slides into the air defense mission. Now, air defense, in a traditional sense, is defending against what we call the symmetric threat, which is a military aircraft that's threatening our airspace. That's what NORAD was developed for. Think the Soviet bombers coming over the pole. That's what we were built for. We still do that every day. In fact, on July 4th, as was reported in the press, some Russian bombers were just off the west coast of California, and we deal with those. We're well prepared to do that, to monitor them and then go out there and intercept them and make sure that everything's going well. We also, since 9/11, have updated extensively our command and control and our processes to deal with what we call the asymmetric threat. And the asymmetric threat is, for the most part, commercial airliners or civil aviation that has been weaponized, as you can imagine. And that, of course, can come from external or internal within the borders of North America. So we had to change our look at Norad Northcom. Before, it was the air defense identification zone and outward, and now we're really looking as much inside the United States, and that's taken an extensive overhaul to be able to do that as far as our processes. We are, we think, very well versed and positioned to do that. Since 9/11, we've had plenty of time to do that. And we do that through what we call Operation Noble Eagle, or O&E. O&E is the process by which we ensure that we've got assets postured throughout North America that are able to respond to threats if necessary, and that's that asymmetric threat. Now, under Noble Eagle, NORAD Air Defenses are positioned throughout the U.S. and Canada, as I mentioned, and they consist of alert fighters, AWACS, tankers, helicopters, and ground-based air defenses. They're capable of reaching major population centers and high-value infrastructure in many cases within minutes. Of particular note are our air defenses around the national capital region here. We've got permanent capability, and then we are also tasked with moving our capability around what you all see as temporary flight restrictions. And those can be for things like what we call National Special Security Events, NSSEs. And what I'm talking about there is things like the UN General Assembly, the Super Bowl, things like that, we're tasked with air defense. We are also tasked by the U.S. Secret Service with defending VIPs as they move around. Thank the President of the United States or the Pope for his visit that's upcoming in New York City. Again, we work very closely with our interagency partners, in this case the Secret Service, but all the other three-letter organizations to make sure that we're doing what they want us to do and very well coordinated with them. We've, in order to execute our Operation Noble Eagle mission, we've got a very clearly defined and extensively planned chain of command, and it goes from the Secretary of Defense all the way down through many layers that all the way to the individual guy sitting in an alert fighter or sitting at a ground-based air defense system. And the chain of command is designed to take effective action very rapidly if required in order to thwart a terrorist threat. Coupled with that chain of command is our rules of engagement, and as you might imagine, these have been very carefully defined and built because of the serious potential of a lethal engagement against a civilian aircraft. It's vastly different, as you might imagine, from a military, U.S. military going against a hostile military aircraft over enemy territory. Those rules of engagement are altogether different from what we're talking about against a civilian airliner over the United States. So I mentioned briefly our fighters, our AWACS. We've got dedicated 24/7 response that we can call on, and also the rotary wing helicopters. And they can intercept, escort, and engage as required. We can modulate these forces, either bring them up, expand them, or bring them down as required. And we can also randomize, I guess, our use. So we intentionally do that to make our adversaries' planning problem harder. So they don't know exactly what we're going to put against any given problem. So that's something that we do by design. Now, DoD, of course, and by DoD, really, I'm folding in the Canadians as well, NORAD. We can't conduct our mission by any stretch without that real close coordination with our interagency partners and the commercial side. Since 9/11, we've taken tremendous strides in this. Pre-9/11, we certainly had a relationship with the FAA, for example, but it wasn't nearly as close as it is now. Now we have special and ongoing relationships with, like I mentioned, the Secret Service, the U.S. Capitol Police, TSA, DHS, et cetera. We also have a very close relationship with the intelligence community. We rely on them for queuing intelligence for this mission. Actually, for the air defense mission, external to the United States is pretty easy and straightforward. When you start talking about intelligence within the United States, that presents an altogether different problem because of intelligent oversight concerns. We don't conduct intelligence within the United States. because we don't do that, America being a free country and all that. But we do work with the intelligence community to get queuing from them. Our relationship with the FAA is of particular note. We rely on FAA radar feeds along with DoD sensors to build our picture. We build a picture that fuses all these different sensors in what's called a common operating picture. We've got FAA representatives that sit on our ops floor 24/7, and my ops floor for the continental region is in Tyndall Air Force Base, and we've got ops floors in Canada and another one in Alaska. We've also got an ops floor at Peterson Air Force Base, and then the sector controllers in New York and Washington State. All of those places have FAA controllers, or in the case of Canada, the Transcan folks. So we work very closely with them, and we monitor their communication networks. Most of the stuff that occurs there over the domestic events network, we don't really care about, but that's typically our first indication that something potentially is going on that we do care about. For example, a Nordo aircraft, an aircraft that's now off flight plan, that's what kind of piques our interest, and the FAA systems are typically our first indication that something is going on. The FAA is also our first indication that what we thought may be a problem is not so much a problem. So, nope, we got that aircraft back in comms. Everybody kind of calms back down and picks up their coffee. If we do have to take some sort of tactical action, again, it's in very close coordination with the FAA. They're the ones doing the guard calls. They're the ones that are clearing the airspace. They're the ones that are expediting the clearance for our military fighters to launch and rapidly get up to the problem wherever that may be. So I can't say enough about our relationship with the FAA. My boss, who is a 3-star at First Air Forces there at Tyndall Air Force Base, he's an Air Guard 3-star, and he's also a Delta airline pilot, by the way. He has a first-name relationship with the FAA security director, and he has told us, operators, that, hey, whatever we can do to continue that relationship and help out general aviation or commercial aviation, back to that request for military assistance I was talking about earlier, he said, we're going to do it. And Admiral Gortney, the 4-star at NORAD, has the same emphasis. Hey, if we can do something to help, then we're going to do that. So back to the interagency coordination. Once we have what seems like a problem for us or something we're interested in, we declare that a track of interest, a TOI, just some of the vernacular we use. And then we will typically start a classified conference call, and this conference call goes across North America, and it has all of the pertinent, relevant agencies on board, and we can modulate this conference call based on the severity of the threat. So if we think we've got another 9/11 type event going on, we're going to bring the highest level decision makers onto this conference call. If it's just a Cessna 172 that's getting close to a temporary flight restricted area, then we will not bring on the SecDef. That kind of thing happens every day, but we'll still convene a conference call. We'll monitor, we'll see if we need to take a tactical action or not, and deal with it that way. It's not just DoD and NORAD on this conference call, it's everybody. Mostly they are listeners, but anybody can key the mic if they've got information that they can add to that conference call to make sure that we're operating off a common operating picture and we all have the right, same pertinent information. That's the conference call where decisions are made as far as what tactical actions we're going to take, and they're relayed out through the sectors to the alert assets that are out flying and on the ground. So I guess I'll end there, but I want to assure you all that since 9/11, we've made tremendous strides in dealing with this asymmetric threat. And frankly, as you all know, we were not prepared to deal with that on 9/11. We're really good at the symmetric threat, and we still are, but that 9/11 threat we didn't have. But I'm here to tell you that with our interagency partners, the professionals at NORAD across the board are well-trained, well-exercised, and well-equipped to deal with the 9/11 style attack. And God forbid we're ever needed for that. But I believe that we are prepared to deal with that if required. So with that, I'll yield the mic.
Roger that. Eric, thank you so very much.
Yes,
and I think that, outstanding presentation. There's no finer example of a requirement to work together with colleagues and interagencies. And we were also very blessed to be down in Tyndall, thanks to your invitation in connection with Captain Rich Huey and Ollie Froelich, who have very, very good connections down at Tyndall and 1st Air Force. We had the opportunity to sit in the watch rooms and go through the simulated scenarios. And for every pilot in this room, if you put yourself in a simulator with engines on fire and having to make decisions with multiple emergencies, you really get the sphincter pretty tight to focus that attention. That's the exact same feeling that you have down in that watch room, where all of a sudden, one time you're drinking coffee, 5 minutes later, all of a sudden there's a potential threat coming into DCA, and you theoretically could be within 15 minutes of having to see an airplane get removed from the sky and diminish the threat. It is very much a real-world type of thing. For those of you that were able to participate in the security, the closed day, Eric was very kind enough to bring up and show one of those demonstrations. Obviously, it was in a closed room and not available to the press and the public, but that is extremely eye-opening, at least from my point of view. And I have to tell you publicly, thank you for everything that you do for standing that watch today, and also for 28 years of service, and really appreciate that. Let's move on to our colleague and friend from ECA, if ALPA, and in Britain, Captain Martin Drake.
Thank you, Fred. Well, it's great to be back in the colonies again after a couple of 100 years. We noticed that you've done one or two things with the place, so we approve of most of it, but there are one or two points more for my benefit than yours. In all seriousness, these events don't happen by accident, and I'd like to take the opportunity, if I may, to thank a few people from the staff who've enabled me to get here. Tina for answering emails at silly times of the day, Cindy for sorting out my stuff and keeping me in the straight and narrow, and Logan for his dress sense. I'd also like to thank my colleagues in the ECA and at ALPA, which is my home association, because without their assistance in getting me here, then I'd have still been halfway across the Atlantic at the moment. So, as you can see, that's me. A sort of short bio of what I do. I thought I'd give a little bit of a flavour of what happens in Europe. There's a load of acronyms, so I thought I'd put them on the screen to save me getting confused more than anything else. So the main organisation within Europe is the Commission, of course, and they have a body of people that come together known as SAGAS. And we discuss security initiatives and bits and bobs that go on to recommend to the Commission what action they're going to take. It's a fairly big meeting, and interesting thing is they say sometimes between the UK and the US it's two nations separated by a common language. In Europe we have multiple nations separated by multiple languages and multiple methods of doing things. And SAGAS is one of the areas we get together where we try and iron out those differences. ECAC, the European Civil Aviation Commission, that has a security forum, so I go to that. There we get slightly more down into the weeds, and we try and work out what bits and bobs are going on. And we do things like the Swiss, for instance, have been trying to build guns and devices using the 3D printers. Quite interestingly, I've seen some video of that. If you're thinking of building one, don't. You're likely to lose your fingers with the current technology. The UK National Aviation Security Committee and the Executive Committee of that, I also sit on that. Staff Measures Working Group, and then ALPA liaises with the CAA and the Department for Transport. As Fred says, that's what I do. But what I want to say to everybody in the room is, first and foremost, I am a pilot. I've got about that amount of experience, give or take. And that's the environment in Europe. I thought it would be quite interesting. I was talking to some Texans a couple of trips ago, and which is that little place the other side of 30 West, that's what it looks like. And the bright lights that you can see are, that's about an hour's worth of air traffic across the centres of Europe. And not surprisingly, you can see the bright bits, so you can see London and Paris and Frankfurt and places like that. And to actually bring it into a UK perspective, because UK sits nicely between Europe and the US, and an awful lot of our traffic comes across in this direction. That is 3 hours worth of tracks across the UK. And you can see a lot of it in and out of the UK, but also you can see the stuff coming across London that goes straight across Ireland and in this direction, and also across the bits of Manchester and Scotland, plus all the stuff that heads north, so that comes across to the west coast of the States. It's an awful lot of aircraft that are in the air at any one time, and we manage that from a security risk perspective. That is managed by the bodies I was talking about before. So, challenges in the European environment. This is not going to be any surprise to anybody sitting in this room. The whole list of stuff there is quite interesting. Airport security gives us a challenge. We live in a free society. And effectively, most of the people we carry around are good people. And they just want to go from A to B. And they want to have a safe and comfortable journey. And airport security needs to be at its peak all the time. It's a job I'm glad I don't have to do. It's the first line of defence that we have when passengers interact with the aviation industry. Cockpit security, I'm sure questions will come up. If they don't, I know Fred's got one seated by me. But cockpit security is of a real interest to us, particularly after the German wings incident, and how we manage that threat and risk. Hijack and bomb threats, I was doing a bit of digging around before I came here, and on average in the United Kingdom we are getting somewhere in the region of 20 bomb threats a week that are put to our aircraft, and that's just UK-based aircraft, and they are managed by a group of bomb threat assessors, which I'm one, and it's quite interesting to see how those come through. Disruptive passengers, yeah, that's something that waxes and wanes depending on what's going on around the world and what's happening. So at the moment, if you're travelling between the UK and Amsterdam on a Friday, along with all the stag and hen parties, yeah, you're going to get some disruptive passengers. I think we seem to have got to grips with that in a wider sense. There's been some really good prosecutions and some education that's gone on. Lasers. That's a real issue to us at the moment, and I think we'll come to that later. Stowaways, yep, we still suffer from stowaways. There's a couple of streets on the approach to London Heathrow where they always land. The undercarriage goes down, and there's been one or two fairly interesting incidents there. Although our latest pair, one unfortunately didn't make it, but the other guy is still in intensive care. He came all the way from Africa. It amazes me how you survive in the wheel well of a 747 for that distance. But yep, that is still a problem to us in the UK. Cyberthreats, we were discussing that earlier. It's a real big issue in terms of denial of service. That seems to be where we are at the moment in our main cyber threats. Although we are in discussions with our friends from both Boeing and Airbus, because as the aircraft got more integrated in their use, then we need to look at how we can prevent bad guys getting bad information onto the aircraft. Because as we get more and more reliant upon the integrated systems that we all fly around with, well, we need to be very careful. I don't necessarily subscribe to some of the more flamboyant discussions that go on in the press. I think some of the claims that have been made are probably a little bit OTT at the moment, but rest assured, this is coming to an aircraft near you soon. REPAS, that's the European for Remotely Piloted Airborne Systems. Well, we've had a good discussion of that this morning, so I won't go into that. And I'm not going to steal the thunder from my colleague on my left as to cargo. There's no such thing as a free lunch, so as ECA and BALPA are paying me to be here, an awful lot of the stuff that we've been doing in Europe, we've distilled down into this publication, and I have a copy to give to Fred. But it is available by going into Euro Cockpit and the publications. You can download your own. There's nothing restricted in this document. It just gives you a flavour of the processes and the procedures that we're doing, and I can commend it to you. There's been a lot of work gone into producing this. So, more challenges in the European environment. Government. We have multiple governments in Europe, and they don't always get on. So we have a governance issue. We have a cultural issue within Europe that we need to look at. Outcome focused, risk based. We discussed that in our closed session, and part of me says cheap, part of me says good. And I think we need to make sure if we're looking at outcome focus, risk base, we do have to do that. We have to make sure that the focus that we are looking at, the outcomes that we required, are based on the risks that we perceive and we have. We mustn't just look at the fact that outcome focus, risk base allows people to get cheap security, because security by its very nature costs. Good security costs a lot. And lack of cooperation, that really is my biggest bugbear at the moment, where we get agencies and governments and associations that won't cooperate with each other. I find that very difficult to countenance. So, where are we going with this? Well, I think the main thrust of my debate here is, or my discussion here, is to say that the answers that we have, which somebody's now kindly put on the screen for me. Well, cooperation. So we need to cooperate with ourselves. We need to have individual member associations cooperating with each other. ALPA does that very well, and our cooperation with Fred and the organisations that I deal with here, they close some of the loops that we've got. So we need cooperation between ourselves. Cooperation between governments. Governments need to cooperate. I think I said yesterday that ICAO has produced the repository of NOTAMs to the industry on security issues. That is only going to be as good as the governments that actually put the information in there. So we must push our governments to making sure that they use that information correctly. And funny old thing, cooperation. We need to have cooperation between the airlines and the trade associations. And it is only by us going and speaking to them, by us getting into the room with them, by us telling them that actually this isn't something that affects your bottom line, because an aircraft crashing, an aircraft being blown out of the sky will affect your bottom line. It's going to take you out. And only by the cooperation between us and the people who employ us and the industry as a whole will we defeat the guys who are here to make sure that we have a bad day at work. Thank you, Fred.
Martin, thank you very much. Appreciate that. And I think, obviously, cooperation is, again, the key to thwarting the efforts of the bad guys. And it's evidenced by your kindness in coming over to present to us. And I think the other thing is agendas is one that kills. You know, everybody has an agenda. The higher up you get in the ladder, there's a lot of people pulling at you. But the agenda for the purest of the security folks that fly airplanes is security and safety, and you can't beat that. So, Martin, thank you very much. I'd like to move to our esteemed colleague, Sue Presti.
Okay, thank you, Fred, and thank you very much to ALPA for the opportunity to be here today. I was really taken with your opening comments and the comments of my predecessor speakers here. We're all echoing the same themes of cooperation, collaboration. So on behalf of TIACA, I'd like to really thank you all for the opportunity to open a dialogue with ALPA and hopefully deepen the cooperation between our associations. What I'd like to do this morning is to just briefly introduce TIACA to you, to talk a little bit about some of the issues that we're working on in the security and safety arena. And then I'd like to close by focusing on one particular initiative within that arena, and that is the ACAS initiative, the Air Cargo Advanced Screening Initiative. So again, if I could just take a moment to introduce TIACA. It is the acronym for the International Air Cargo Association. We're based in Miami, Florida. But we are a global association, and we are the only global association that focuses on air cargo and that has as its membership the entire air cargo supply chain. So our members include not only the airlines, and by that I mean the all-cargo airlines, the passenger airlines who have both freighter service, but also those passenger airlines who simply carry cargo in the belly of the planes. We have charter airlines as members. We have ground handlers, forwarders. We even have the airports themselves as members, because they are all part of the air cargo environment. We have three pillars within TIACA's work, and they are networking, advocacy, and education. The networking aspect we conduct primarily through conferences. We have something we call the Air Cargo Forum, which is quite large and is held every 2 years. Our next one is coming up in Paris, my favorite location out of all the ones we've held it in. And that will be held in October of 2016. So we would welcome any of you to come join us for that. We also hold annual events, and during those events we do quite a bit of programming on key issues for air cargo. That is part of our education mission to members. We also have several specialized educational programs, and one area that we particularly try to focus on is educational opportunities for younger professionals, really trying to establish ways not just to attract really great people into air cargo, but to find ways to train them and hopefully retain them and help them move up the ladder in the air cargo companies. Then within the advocacy realm, which is the one that I work within, we focus on 4 core areas: security and safety, which I'm going to talk to you all about, but we also deal with environmental and infrastructure issues, e-commerce issues, and I'm not sure the extent to which you might be familiar with things, but certainly the cargo side of the business has lagged the passenger side in terms of becoming automated, and there are quite a few challenges remaining. So we spend quite a bit of time working on those issues and advocating for ways forward. And then the fourth and final area that we focus on is market access and trade facilitation. I should also say within advocacy we have two key representatives and focal points. One is Washington, D.C., the other is Brussels. So I do have a colleague who works these issues in Europe. Within this arena of security and safety, what do we really focus on, and what organizations do we work these issues through? Well, since we do address global issues, we are very much engaged with the key global organizations, and really there are 2, ICAO and the World Customs Organization. So we spend quite a bit of time really working through the processes of those organizations, and this can be a very time-consuming, lengthy effort. There, as with any large organizations and any multinational organizations, they have some very rigorous procedures, some very time-consuming meeting protocols, and everything feeds up and through certain core committees. So within ICAO, we're very much involved in the Aviation Security Panel and its working group on air cargo security. I generally get seated next to the ALPA delegate, and so I have established great relationships with many of them at those meetings. Within the World Customs Organization, it's primarily the technical expert group on air cargo security and the SAFE framework, which was established after 9/11 and was really a way of developing ways to enhance data and data submissions into the various customs systems. Here in Washington, we work with the U.S. Congress. Generally speaking, in Washington, you obviously have the three branches of government, and really for our purposes, the executive branch and the legislative branch are the ones where the action is. So we deal quite a bit with Congress, which can be very challenging for a number of reasons. One is that there are so many congressional committees that have jurisdiction over air cargo issues. So there are almost 40 overall, which makes it very challenging to get to know the key people, the key staffers, and to keep them briefed and abreast of everything. What we try to focus on is really educating on air cargo itself. I think there is, to the extent that people think about air cargo, they tend to assume that it's FedEx, it's UPS, it's the integrator traffic, and there is still a lack of awareness that so much air cargo is carried in the bellies of passenger planes. So we do explain the entire air cargo supply chain. We explain that for the passenger airlines. There is a whole chain of companies involved in that, the forwarders, the ground handlers, the shippers, et cetera. And over the years, I think we've been successful in educating and really achieving greater awareness among the key staff and the key members that this is the air cargo environment. Then we work quite a bit with executive branch agencies. Our work tends to be focused with TSA and with Customs, and they are both within the Department of Homeland Security. But there are many, many other agencies as well, the FAA, other Department of Transportation agencies, State Department, Commerce, the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, others. Our key security issues, though, tend to really be ones where TSA has, if not sole jurisdiction, certainly primary jurisdiction. And so the issues we work on relate to the security programs that apply to the various members of the air cargo supply chain. So again, there are many different security programs depending on the players. There are many, many, many requirements. Those sometimes are changed, and there is always the need to clarify exactly what the changes are, what they mean, and how you communicate that throughout the supply chain, because these security programs are sensitive security information and therefore are held confidential, and yet for many of the players in the air cargo chain, you need to abide by certain requirements. So there are communications challenges in all of that. We also work on R&D issues, and here there's cargo, unfortunately, falls into sort of the leftover category. Most of the R&D has been focused on the passenger environment, And quite frankly, a lot of the technologies available to cargo are either straight from the passenger environment or slightly modified from the passenger environment. And there's a big difference between a suitcase and a containerized or palletized cargo shipment, and we try to explain that there really ought to be more of a focus on cargo and in bringing, hopefully in developing and bringing to availability some technologies that would be directed primarily at cargo to get at some of these needs. Resources, and here there's a particular issue with TSA, and TSA, like any organization, restructures at times. But within the cargo environment, some of its recent restructurings have been particularly challenging because as recently as 3 or 4 years ago, there was a huge cargo division within TSA with about 70 professionals. For the industry, there were very clear lines of communication, and it was fairly easy to know who to go to address particular issues. That has all changed with recent reorganizations, and there's no longer this cargo division. People are dispersed throughout other areas. So the responsibilities are still there and are still being worked, but it is not nearly as clear-cut as it used to be. And so we certainly have urged TSA to look at that and to try to reestablish more of a core cargo function. We frequently address postal issues, and just as many people don't appreciate how much cargo is flown in the bellies, I think even more people don't recognize how much postal traffic is flown, and we believe it's very important that those postal shipments also be secure and safe, and so we've opened a dialogue with the Universal Postal Union and with individual postal authorities to try to better understand what the current procedures are and to try to identify ways to enhance security procedures for those shipments. Again, since we're global and we have members who are flying internationally, mutual recognition is very important to us. You can't possibly operate a business where you're flying into more than 200 countries and territories, and then you're having to abide by 200 plus different security regimes. So the mutual recognition that TSA has utilized in the past has been very, very beneficial. We are currently going through a phase where some of those mutual recognition agreements are being renewed and discussed, and this is a really important issue for us because, again, any changes really need to be notified to the industry well in advance so that there is time to adapt to any new requirements. And then before I focus on ACAS, I thought I would mention one other area where I think it's probably of particular interest to you all, which is lithium batteries. And we have had, as TIACA, our existing position on lithium batteries is that we very much support a global harmonized approach. Again, understanding that it is extremely difficult to conduct business doing things differently into different markets. So we have advocated for ICAO-wide standards, and we have certainly advocated for enhanced education and training and enforcement of ICAO standards. I did want to mention that with Boeing's recent announcement and certainly with recent developments, that our Security and Safety Subcommittee has agreed to take another look at what our current position is and to look at whether we need to update it in light of these recent developments. So that is something that we will be taking on in the coming weeks. And now to sort of just focus the last couple of minutes of my comments on ACAS. I did want to talk about this because we really see ACAS as a game changer, and we hope that it will become a model for future security initiatives. So first, what is ACAS? ACAS, again, the Air Cargo Advanced Screening Program, it was developed in the wake of the Yemen printer cartridge incident. And with that, of course, as you all know, fortunately, there was intelligence, and fortunately those shipments were intercepted before they had the opportunity to do any damage. But in the wake of that, Secretary Napolitano called in the CEOs of the 4 express companies, and they had a meeting to really talk about the incident and focus on what could we do, we, the community, not just industry, but government as well, working together to find ways to improve security so that hopefully something like this would never happen again. So they agreed to test out a new approach whereby the industry would try to provide certain data that we would ordinarily collect, but we wouldn't report until later in the supply chain. And we would try to provide that data earlier. We would provide it through Customs' existing automation system, but then Customs and TSA would work together, something that had never happened before. And they would develop their own, based on their own knowledge and intelligence information, algorithms to do risk assessment on this data. They could then use the results to communicate back to industry and to indicate whether any additional steps were necessary before that shipment would get loaded onto a plane. So this pilot began, Yemen was October of 2010. This pilot started almost immediately thereafter, and by December 2010, there was some live testing of it. And quite frankly, the testing has continued. We're 4.5 years out from that. The pilot has expanded to include the passenger carriers, the forwarders who feed into the passenger carriers, really the entire air cargo supply chain. It has remained informal at this point. At some point in the future, it will become a mandatory program. But I think the important thing is that it does cover more than 85% of the shipments to the United States. So even at a voluntary level, it is quite extensive, and it has looked at and vetted over 200 million shipments already. So why do we consider this a success, and why do we think this is the model for how to move forward? Well, again, to echo many of the comments we've heard today, it's risk-based, it's intelligence-driven, it's outcome-focused. It is truly, truly collaborative. This was something that was developed, with industry and government seated at the same table, working through things, and with the agreement that we would pilot everything. You're always going to make assumptions, but in ACAS, we test out those assumptions and we see what the results are. We assess that, and then we make certain course corrections based on that. And, as industry, we think that's a fantastic precedent and approach. We really feel that using pilots, and it's a very popular word in this room, I suppose, but also for us, it's just essential to pilot these things so that you don't impose a regulatory framework without truly understanding what the impacts are. It leverages existing processes. We haven't had to change, as industry, our business processes other than to try to move up the timeline for providing data. It uses Customs' existing automation system. All of this is a fantastic way to take what you have and look at ways to add an additional layer of security. And that's the closing thought that I wanted to make, which is that Again, this is one new layer in a continually evolving, multi-layered approach, but we do think it is a terrific success, and again, just a really solid model for future security initiatives. So with that, I'll close my comments and welcome any questions during the Q&A.
All right, Sue, thank you so very much. And as a cargo pilot, flying for a very small company in Memphis, I greatly appreciate all your efforts and something you talked about with advocacy. I know that you spend a lot of time doing that, obviously down in Washington, but also in Brussels. It's something that's extremely important. No matter how many great ideas we have, whether it's in safety and security, if we can't affect or change laws and rules that pertain to us, then our great ideas fall on deaf ears. It doesn't affect any change. So my small plug for the PAC, at least for ALPA, it's so imperative that we have a great and strong government affairs program to be able to affect changes for the folks that create our laws. And thank you for doing that. And also with the ACAS, something that when we think of security, it's imperative that, remember, the bad guys are trying to thwart our way of life, and that's not just by blowing airplanes up. If they have the ability to stop or shut down or impede our progress of passengers or cargo, they kill us through our economy. And we can never lose sight of what goes on in cargo, and we need to walk that fine line with being able to give the best security as possible, as Martin talked about, but also letting goods and shipments flow freely, and that's the fine line that we walk through. And so very much I appreciate your efforts on that. Our next guest, good friend and also colleague that started off his career a few years ago in the Marine Corps and transitioned into the FBI with a great background in law enforcement, and then was able to shift over to be United Airlines captain, successful career. And as you can tell by him coming in today, the perfect measure and use of his time. Did not have to listen to the first couple panels speak. And, but in all seriousness, I want to welcome somebody that has, with his teammate, with Mr. Jesse Lay, has changed, in my opinion, the most important program that we have in aviation security is the FFDO program. Jim, I thank you in advance for the work that you and Jesse are doing. You have taken this program and all the FFDOs in this room and at home realize how much you guys have done for the program for our country, and I thank you for that in advance. Thank you. Jim?
Well, on behalf of my colleague Jesse, and who happens to be here today, I want to apologize for my tardiness.
No worries.
I'm glad to be here. ALPA is a special place in my heart. I'm here today representing the FFDO program, which is attached to the Office of Training and Workforce Engagement, the Law Enforcement Industry Training Division, Aviation Programs Branch. And in the branch, I'm a program manager within the branch. We manage the FFDO program as well as the Crew Member Self-Defense program, which is another very important, yet not as advertised program that is extremely important to the security of this nation and our travelers. Just to give you a little bit of background and history in terms of the program, if you're not familiar with it, most of you probably are. But considering the fact that this is an ALPA function, you'll be happy to know that shortly after 2001, with the pressures that ALPA was playing in the arena at that time, had requested and got a feasibility study performed by then the FBI, which brought together a program, different name. However, the process for which we put together in a collaborative approach with ALPA came up with a program that later became the basis for the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program, which is the home for many, many federal law enforcement officers. In November 2011, or I'm sorry, November 2001, ATSA came into being, which gave TSA the authority to arm volunteer pilots, commercial airline pilots, and that was up to the administrator to make that decision as to whether or not that was going to be implemented. As many of you know, in the years that followed, especially in the early or middle part of 2002, and in the fall of 2002, the Airline Pilots Against Terrorism Act actually became in existence, and that outlined not only the fact that airline pilots would be trained to defend the cockpits, but it also gave a timeline and a procedure in place that we follow yet to this day. APATA is an extremely important document to our program. We live and die by it, and it actually has been a guiding force in everything that we do. The basic FFDO, or Federal Flight Deck Officer, is trained in Artesia, New Mexico, in the use of firearms, the use of force to include deadly force, legal issues. As you can imagine, like any other law enforcement organization, we have to ensure that our officers do in fact follow the law, and that that law is there for our protection. The psychology of survival, it's a law enforcement practice that's taught in every academy across the nation. And the program's standard of operating procedures, which is a document that's always under review. It has even recently been under review, and will continue to be looking at better ways to improve the program and make it a little bit more efficient in terms of how we operate, as well as giving the federal officers in this program an opportunity to stay within what we require in terms of the training and the legal aspects. Some of the requirements of being an FFDO: you must be a U.S. citizen, of course. Have and maintain a current FAA airman certificate, either first class or second class. Have and maintain, or actually have and maintain your airman certificate, which in this case an ATP or a commercial airline license, and be an eligible flight crew member flying for a passenger and all cargo aircraft, a commercial venture. So we don't distinguish between cargo and commercial in terms of the federal officers that are assigned to this program. They are treated equally the same. And if anybody asks anyone in our office what our goals are at this point, our philosophy is centered around the pilot who's flying at 35,000 feet armed to protect that airplane. That's our client, and that's who we support, and we will continue to have that philosophy as long as we're in charge of the program. We know that it's one size does not fit all. We know that every FFDO that's out there has specific personal needs or professional needs, and we address those each as we get them. As everybody knows, the program is a voluntary program. A pilot volunteer fills out a questionnaire, submits that questionnaire. It's looked over and it's sent off to, if everything looks good, it's sent off to background investigation process. That background investigation is a fairly thorough background investigation to ensure that the quality of people that are in this program are above reproach. And once that background is completed, all that information is sent to TSA's Office of Security, or commonly known as Personal Security, PERSEC. They review all the information. They then look at it, and they can either make a recommendation, not recommend it, or they refer it to us for further review. If that latter occurs, they further review. We look over all the background investigation again, determine whether or not this looks like a person that we want to deputize as a federal law enforcement officer in the program. If that should happen, we reach out to the individual. He or she will be given the opportunity to choose from a training program, which is 6 days, 5.5 to 6 days. They will then be assigned a class date in Artesia, New Mexico, which is the garden spot of America. Anybody been there? At any rate, it's a great facility. It's not at all like the surrounding area as far as desolate. It has fantastic training facilities out there. Not only does the FFDOs train there, but other law enforcement agencies use that within the FLETC process. In terms of the training, each FFDO, the training costs, it used to be back in the day when we've trained our first FFDOs back in 2003, that the FFDO incurred the price of training on themselves, which included their housing. They had to pay for their meals, their transportation to and from, which most of us back in those days, being airline employees, had at least the ability to fly space available. Today, the training is completely absorbed by TSA in terms of the housing costs and the meal costs. You still got to get there on your own, and and we recognize the sacrifice that's made by every individual that participates in this program. We understand the sacrifice that they make to get the time off. That's either vacation time, drop trips, however they can work that out with their chief pilots. But we know that that's a sacrifice, and that actually calculates to, that can be quantified as a financial sacrifice and time as well. In October of 2014, this program was reassigned to its current place with the Office of Training and Workforce Engagement. Prior to that, it was the Office of Law Enforcement who took it to that level or took it to that point. Since October, we have had introduced numerous initiatives. Some are still in process, and I won't go into too much detail about the process or where they are in the process, because that always is, as you know, if you deal with government, there's a process. And we will live within the process that was put out for us. I will say this, though, that for the first time in the history of the program, there are federal flight deck officers who have been recognized for their volunteerism. We introduced a program called the President's Volunteer Service Award Program that recognizes the efforts and the sacrifices that have been made by our federal law enforcement officers over the years, both personal and financial. And we have recognized them in different ceremonies, and we will look through the entire list of our federal flight deck officers and determine those that qualify for that prestigious award, and they will be recognized at some point down the road. We are going to go back in time and capture those people. We also introduced for the first time a retirement program, which each retired federal flight deck officer receives a badge in a block of plastic, I guess is what it is. But it's a real badge and a certificate of retirement from the program, which is something that was introduced by our branch manager, Jesse Lay, and we're all happy to participate in that, because there is nothing like rewarding and recognizing those that have sacrificed so much over the years. Very, very basically, the mission of the FFDO is primarily to protect the flight deck against terrorist acts, criminal activity that may be taking place on board his or her aircraft, and bring the airplane home. And the way they do that is through the training that we give them at FLETC, to include the deadly force training and lethal force training that is provided them in a training environment. I believe that's probably all I have, Fred, in terms of the history and where we are right now in the program. I would entertain some questions. Obviously, we're limited as to some of the answers, perhaps, and I hope you'll understand that there are some sensitive areas that we will not discuss in a public forum.
Well,
Thank you again for
Jim,
this
thank you so very much, and appreciate you being here. And one of the things that you said, you talked about mindset, and I would certainly echo your suggestion that you know, every pilot hopefully will have the ability, but also want to have the ability to step up and participate in the FFDO program. One of the things you talked about earlier is we as a collective group, as a profession, need to change our mindset. We have to establish the fact that we refuse to be victims, and that we are not going to lay down, and we're going to stand up against any threat, any challenge that we have, whether it's in the air or it's on the ground. Being an FFDO, part of the training that we had is again, you talked about, we go down, you understand lethal force, you know, you're deputized, you're issued a weapon, but the real training comes into the fact that you are a weapon. It's not the fact that you have a gun or you have any other tools with you. It's the way you think. It's the way you would address and solve problems in a security environment. And if we could, my goal as the security chairman is we could morph at least the folks at ALPA and hopefully change the whole industry into that mindset to where we refuse to be victims. We're going to work together to thwart the efforts of the bad guys. And the FFDO training is one of those venues that's afforded to us, again, by the act of, by Congress. And I know that it's a very, very strong supported program on the Hill with a lot of advocacy from ALPA and also from other of the other associations that fly airplanes in the United States. One of the things that's really interesting, again, with the FFDO program, it's not just the pilots that are in there, but because of this program, it really thwarts the bad guys' efforts in planning. And so, again, it's another layer. As Sue was talking about, the multiple layers of efficiency and of protecting our profession and our airplanes. But the FFDO program provides that mystery as to who's going to be in that cockpit. There are many, many thousands of FFDOs out there. The number's classified, but the program is expanding through the support and financial support from Congress, and because we have two outstanding folks that are running the program, Mr. Jim Krauss and also Jesse Lay. One of the things that's interesting that we also had the opportunity as a security group to go down to Tyndall earlier this year. And when we talk about having organizations overlay, Eric, if you wouldn't mind commenting on, as you talk about the threat ring and the time when maybe a potential asymmetrical hostile threat is coming into you, what it means to you to either have a law enforcement officer or maybe an FFDO on board. How does that work with your decision-making ability?
Well, part of our process, as I mentioned, involves the interagency. We have essentially a clearinghouse at the Transportation Security Operations Center, TSOC, in Herndon, Virginia. That's where all the interagency partners are at their ops center, and we've got a direct line with them. So when something is happening, one of our first steps is to collaborate with them very quickly to find out passenger lists. Hey, is there anything unusual about that aircraft? They have a direct line to industry, so they're the ones that are talking to your company to see if they can contact you, your cockpit through ACARS, for example. And they also have a master list of what is on that aircraft with regard to federal air marshals and FFDOs. So that's one of our first checklist items. Hey, if there's a FAM or an FFDO aboard, that is going to certainly roll into our calculus as far as what we're expecting out of that aircraft, and if we think it's been taken over by bad guys, we are going to then roll that into our analysis that perhaps it could be re-taken over by the good guys with the guns.
So does that potentially give you guys a little more time?
Absolutely. If we think there's any chance for one of the other layers of defense, and certainly the reinforced cockpit doors, all of the security that goes on prior to takeoff, and then the FAMs and FFDOs, those are kind of the layers from our point of view, and we are the last blunt instrument. We don't want to be in this position, so we're going to rely on everything else we can before then to hopefully resolve that situation.
Outstanding. All right, folks, I think we're out of time. Please help me thank our esteemed colleagues up on the dais here. Thank you guys very much.